everyone. Welcome to The Next Level. I'm JVL here with my best friends, Sarah Longwell and Timothy P. Miller. Welcome to all of you guys who are normal Charlie Bulwark podcast listeners. This is a show we do just for members of Bulwark Plus every week, but we are filling your Christmas stocking with it this week while Charlie is out and away. Sarah and Tim, how are you guys?
Hey, JVL. I would like to say all the people who might be listening, who are used to hearing Charlie, don't turn this off. This is a great podcast, and I know you love Charlie, but we're going to have fun. We have fun every week.
They knew that I was on here. Why would they be turning it off, Sarah? I mean, they knew that I'm just going to be firing, hot takes into their eardrums, giving them an E explicit rating. Why would you have even put that thought in their mind?
I don't know. Sometimes when people are like, hey, I listen to this guy every day and he's not here right now. And so, moving on. I just think that they should give us a chance.
We have a relationship, me and Charlie's listeners, and I'll be back tomorrow subbing in for Charlie. So, people can just kind of settle in for a little extra shot of homosexuality this week.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Speaking of homosexuality, Liz Cheney's in the news again.
It's the other one.
It's the other Cheney.
Right. Sorry. Look, the big news this week is that Liz Cheney, during the Mark Meadows contempt vote over with the January 6th committee, went and read out some text messages that the president's chief of staff received while the insurrection was ongoing on the afternoon of January 6th. And they were amazing. And it's one of these things where I feel as though they were amazing and we had perhaps 2 hours worth of people having their minds blown. And by now, today, Wednesday, barely 48 hours later, everyone has just assimilated this and moved on and been like, yeah, well, this is just another thing that happens. As if it was not another signpost on the way to the fall of the Democratic order.
I have so many thoughts on this text messaging situation.
Sarah, go.
Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about the response to this from the conservative smart set. So the texts come out, and the texts are a bunch of Fox News personalities, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Brian Kilmeade, and they're all saying things like, Laura Ingram's are actually my favorite because hers was, this is making us all look bad. And right, we've just gone through the Chris Cuomo situation where people demanded his head for being too chummy with an elected official who was his brother. And fair enough, Chris Cuomo had to go. He went. This is a whole bunch of Fox News personalities who clearly just have Mark Meadows on speed dial telling him, you got to get the president to tell these people to stand down. It's making us look bad because we're part of the same team. We're not journalists. We're part of the White House comm strategy. So then the smart conservative set has basically come out and said, well, what do you mean? Why is this bad? Look at them. They're saying that the insurrection is not good and that people should go home.
They were
trying to help.
Standing up for America.
They were trying to help.
They're great American heroes, I'm sure. The problem is that they went on TV that night, the next day, and for the entire 10 months following, saying this was Antifa false flag, saying that it was no big deal, doing whataboutism about, Black Lives Matter, blaming it on Nancy Pelosi. But the texts show something very specific, which is that they knew how bad it was, and they knew that Trump was the only one who could call them off because this was his people. It's just like when we found out that Donald Trump knew in the early days of COVID that it was really bad. And he told Bob Woodward, hey, this is going to be really bad. It's really serious. At the same time, he was telling the American people, it's not worse than the flu. Go to work. It's not a big deal. These people say the truth in private, and they lie knowingly, purposefully to their viewers in public. And the idea that the Ben Shapiros and the Ari Fleischers would say, well, this doesn't show some grand conspiracy. This shows that they were trying to help, misses the point entirely, willfully so. That's my starting rant.
I have to disagree with you, Sarah. I think that, as JVL recommended that Joe Biden consider pardoning the QAnon shaman, I think he should consider bringing Laura and Sean in for some kind of Medal of Freedom type ceremony. I mean, thank God that we have protectors of the democratic order like Laura Ingraham, who are willing to step aside for a moment, take off their journalism hat and speak to the president as a friend, to the president's chief of staff, as a friend and a peer, and let them know that they care more about the country and the image of their party than they do about their journalistic responsibilities, and that this is a time that they need to stand in. That's the Ben Shapiro. It's not just the Ben Shapiro and Ari Fleischer position. It's many of the people on the editors podcast over at National Review. It's most of the Republican candidates' position. There's nothing to see here. They were just trying to help out in a tough situation. I don't see. I don't understand what your problem could possibly be with that.
I mean, the problem with this is that which is it? Because if what they were saying was true, if they were concerned citizens speaking out, trying to help, well, Donald Trump didn't take their advice. And so that means he did something bad. And presumably they would have to criticize him in public for it. And so they have to pick, right? I mean, either Donald Trump was doing something bad and they were the heroes, or if everything was fine and Donald Trump didn't do anything fine, then they're propagandists who were saying one thing in private and another in public. And I mean, of course, this is a false choice because nobody ever is ever going to make them.
They were hysterical. They just let their emotions get in the way, Jonathan.
Yes.
They were hysterical in the moment. Donald Trump showed his steely resolve.
This is why
he understood it wasn't
is
that
president
big of a
and
deal.
they're not,
Yeah.
because he's able to rule with strength. He's able to put down that electoral college with real strength. I don't know, Sarah.
These fucking assholes. Just I was going to say, this has been the entire move ever since January 6th. It was as clear as day on the night of January 6th that this is what they were all going to do. There was this kind of liminal moment where everyone just emoted, right? And it was an emotional moment. And this is really the truth of what happened. You see the Capitol getting sieged. You don't exactly know what is happening. You hear reports of people dying, right? And believe it or not, somewhere deep in her little Grinchian heart, like Laura Ingraham, has just a little bit of beating blood in there somewhere. And it was beating, and she was also looking out for the self-interest of her party and her cause, but she was emoting. So was Sean, so was Kilmeade, so was Lindsey Graham, so was all of these assholes. And for some of them it took an hour, for some of them it took a week, for some of them, like Mitch McConnell, they played footsie with caring about their feelings for about 3 weeks. They all acted as anybody who is not completely has not been just completely lost into the Trumpian Kool-Aid would react. This is horrible. This is un-American. This needs to stop. This is not who we are. That is how anyone with any amount of humanity left reacted. The problem was once they realized.
Yeah.
What?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm going to disagree, but I want you to finish.
The problem is they realized that wasn't possible, right? Like that wasn't sustainable because that they had lost control of not only the people that were storming that building, but all of the Trump supporters out there, all of the people that had been watching their shows, all of the people that had been voting for them. Those folks were in charge now, and they needed to tell those folks a story that maintained Donald Trump as strong leader, that maintained them as the righteous ones, and Antifa and Black Lives Matter as the black hats. And they retconned their whatever explanation they needed from that end point. And Laura did it by the time she went on TV that night. Lindsey Graham did it the day after he got shouted down at an airport. Mitch McConnell did it when he realized he didn't have the votes for impeachment. And now they're all singing from the same hymn book.
So it is possible that the moment of, oh gosh, this is so terrible, you have to do something, was based on emotion. It's also possible that it was based on a belief that this would hurt the Republican Party and that this would finally be a bridge too far for voters. And this is another case where Donald Trump knew his voters much better than anybody else around him. He knew it during Grab Them by the Pussy. He knew it during the first impeachment. And he knew it here, that this was not going to hurt him with Republicans, that Republicans were going to be fine with this. And then in a week, Republicans would go from being like, oh gosh, it's kind of bad, to, well, no, it wasn't real, it was false flag, to, you're damn right they did it because they're great patriots and we need more of it. And he was right and they were wrong. And it's, the Republican elites, the people in Conservatism Inc., they have been wrong about their voters every minute of every day since Donald Trump showed up on the scene.
I guess just really quick and then starting it up. And I don't know that those two things are mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you can have an emotional reaction that says this is bad and then, oh shit, this is bad for us, right? Like those things kind of go hand in hand, right? Like I guess my point is if Laura and Kilmeade and these assholes look at what's happening and they say, God, I think this is bad, right? Then they assume that means that the people that are watching them all are having that same reaction that they are, and that informs their strategic choice. We have to do something about this to help the president, right? So I agree with you on the on the fact that Trump knew the voters better than they did, but I think on what was the impetus for their reaction, I think it was related to just that, visceral feeling that they had that day. Maybe I'm wrong.
One of the things that I'm hung up on is we grew up as young conservatives, and one of the things that we were steeped in was the liberal bias in the media. And if you knew a lot about conservative policy or you were engaged in those debates and you'd listen to a story on NPR about something, you would sit there and be like, well, that's not right. That's not the correct way to frame that issue or whatever. And so I was certainly, the bias in the media was something that I focused on. And somehow, though, Fox News, the entire primetime lineup is texting the chief of staff using the phrase us. Like, one of the things that I tweeted this, but like, Fox News is going to have no trouble at all weathering this particular scandal. For any other news station, it would be catastrophic because the expectations of them, the reason Chris Cuomo gets fired is the expectations is that they have an obligation. And there is an entire media ecosystem, people have built their careers in conservative media banging on about left-wing bias in our media. And it's not that there's not some truth to that. It's that the response of Fox News is so wildly disproportionate to the point where what they do is not news at all. It is constructions of alternate realities. And what the texts show is that they knew in that moment how bad it was. And like 6 hours, it's just like the vaccines. They all are vaccinated. They're all taking the pandemic seriously, but they go out and they tell their audiences that, I don't know, these vaccines could be really dangerous. I don't know. Look at this. They all wear masks. You see clips of the Fox News newsroom and everybody's wearing masks, right? Because they're protecting themselves, but they're happy to scare their viewers and give them bad information. And it's the same way on January 6th. And so nobody says, boy, I'm so shocked the Fox News primetime lineup was doing this. Everybody's like, of course they were. And they escape accountability because of that, because we don't expect anything better of them.
Consider the counterfactual that Lester Holt is tweeting President Biden right now and saying, Mr. Biden, this inflation stuff, this is hurting us. This is hurting our side. You got to do something about this right now. I mean, obviously it would be catastrophic. Lester Holt would be out on his ass the next day. But Fox has been, the notion that they were unbiased has been a troll from the start. I mean, right. The whole fair and balanced tagline, some of the viewers, some of the rubes might have taken it seriously, but a lot of the viewers knew it was a joke, right? It was a troll of the other side. It was saying, you guys the other side isn't balanced either, so we're just going to do this, fair and balanced news. So their audience has been conditioned for this, right? So there would be no reason for anybody in the audience to be upset. That what they would expect would be for the hosts would be texting with the president and the chief of staff giving them advice. So I think that is the key difference here. It was one thing I disagreed with JVL of your newsletter yesterday. You were like, real journalists, like we're not having lunch with the people that we cover and giving them advice. And like, that's where I think people get lost in all this. Like, there is a gray area, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with, any administration, having relationships with certain reporters and like meeting and talking to them, having off the record conversations, trying to bounce things off them. People need to get outside their bubble. Like, maybe, the journalists, some sort of feedback that people are getting from the road, that they can say, hey, is there something that can inform what we're doing here that can help us be more responsive? Having relationships isn't the problem. The problem is when you cross these lines that we set for as far as journalistic ethics are concerned, from having those relationships, in order to try to inform how you're governing and how you're responding to the media, to turning that into the reporter actually becomes the strategic advisor. The reporter becomes the communications consultant.
But there's a real counterfactual to this, right? So Jake Sherman also texted Mark Meadows, right? And he said, you got to do something. Right? I can't remember exactly what his text was, but it was, we're scared to do something. He had the chief of staff's phone number, probably because he's a source, right? So all of the idea that they would just have the number and would reach out in a catastrophic situation and say, you've got to help us, like it's really bad in here. That's not the part that's bad. And this is why you get the Ben Shapiro's and the Ari Fleischer saying, see, they were just trying to tamp down the situation. Isn't that good? The thing is that Jake Sherman didn't go on for 10 months to obfuscate what about and lie about January 6th, at least not to my knowledge. And he also didn't say, this is making us look bad, right?
Yeah.
Like the stuff from Laura and from the Fox guys is about, our team's going to get hurt by this, and is a we're on the same boat. Jake Sherman is like, I got your number and things are going haywire. And like, I bet Jake Sherman's not the only person.
I didn't love that Jake didn't share those texts.
I got to tell you, I saw that Jake Sherman thing yesterday and I thought to myself, this is a real serious breach.
I thought it was bad that he didn't tell people earlier, right?
Should have been the next morning.
Yeah,
Like the thing he should have written the next morning. Like if you're going to say, look, I was in a burning building, we were. That's fine. I still think it's special pleading. It's asking for favors. That is asking the chief of staff to do a favor for you. And I don't like it. I think it's bad. I don't like any of this. And all these, and look, this is me railing against 200 years of American journalism.
Wait a minute. They were inside. They were trying to communicate how bad the situation. So this is the difference. Like Laura and those guys were presumably watching it on TV, right? Jake Sherman was in the Capitol being attacked. And so I don't know about special pleading so much as telling people who were outside how bad it was getting inside and that they had to do something about it.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I don't think it was special pleading. People are humans. Like
I'm not.
The doors are getting barged down and nothing is happening. You're like, what the fuck, White House? Like, what in the fuck? Like, I don't like it. I think that's totally a reasonable thing to send. The problem is they didn't do anything. You didn't respond. They didn't respond for 5 hours. So then it's your obligation to say, hey, by the way, in case there was any doubt, that the highest levels of the White House, they knew how bad it was. I know that because I was texting them, and they didn't do anything for 4 hours. And I haven't watched all the tapes of Jake on MSNBC. I'm sure he kind of implied that at various points, but that should have been in the punch bowl the next morning, and that makes me uncomfortable.
I totally all of this stuff. Anytime you see some journalist sitting down and glad handing with a politician they nominally cover, I always think it's bad. I've never liked any of this stuff. I've never liked the idea of like going out to drinks unless you're treating them as a source and using them as a source. The idea that it is a social call with politicians, but again, this is, and I don't like it.
Build relationships. So this is now we're getting into this Twitter zone of people who are like Maggie Haberman and these are access journalists. And it's like, well, that's, part of that is the price of doing business, and it's not always pretty, but you have to be able to get information. You have to build relationships to build trust to get information. So
anyway, but this is, so here's my question to you guys. So we have these asymmetrical standards,
which almost feels like an understatement of a word at this point. Asymmetrical. It's like non-standard.
The glass half full version of this would be yes. But the mainstream media's standards are ultimately a source of strength for it. And the conservative media's lack of standards are ultimately a weakness for it. Would you agree that that is true? Because I do not.
No,
it's the opposite. It's the reverse.
So will you unpack that a little bit, Sarah? Because I agree, but I'm not sure why I agree.
Well, for the reasons I stated before, the idea that nobody is sitting around thinking that Fox is the phrase is soft bigotry of low expectations, but the bigotry is not the right word here. It's like the no consequences of low expectations. Because when you just don't think, when everybody says, well, of course that's how Fox was reacting, then it's the same way with Republican politicians, right? The idea that we have stopped expecting them to do the right thing lets them off the hook for ever not doing the right thing. There's no accountability then, right? There's only accountability when there are standards. And so this is how Fox News evades accountability. But I just want to make one other point, which is—
Can I just talk on this point, though?
Okay.
Because I just like, I think that there's a little bit of mainstream media accountability for this. And I think that they found themselves in this sour spot. And because, JVL, I do think that it would potentially be a strength for the mainstream media to have standards and for Fox to have no standards if the mainstream media was widely accepted to have, to be credible, right? Like if 80% of the country thought that the mainstream media was credible and 20% thought that, they were biased or whatever, and they just trusted their fake news on Fox, that would be a source of strength for the mainstream media. But that's not where we are. We're at 50-50, maybe even lower. And so I think that over time, there has to be a little bit of accountability here for the fact that people in the mainstream media, there was a truth to what you were saying earlier, Sarah, about how there was some liberal bias in the mainstream media. It was a cultural bias. It was a friendliness with Democratic politicians in the way they didn't have with Republican politicians. There are also some other biases. There are, recency bias and corporate bias. And so it's not just a pure Democratic Party bias, but there was a real liberal bias. And they pretended that it wasn't there for the longest time, right? And so I hear a lot from my Republican friends. They say, well, the mask came off during the Trump era. And in some ways, the mask needed to come off because in order to be honest, you needed to speak truth about what Donald Trump was doing. But because there was that lack of trust going into it, people thought, oh, you were just kind of pulling your punches the whole time before this. And this is what you really thought. You're hostile to us. You're hostile to our party. I think there are elements of that's fair. There are elements that are unfair. But the problem is now, when you look at the asymmetry, you have the one side on Fox that is openly partisan and doesn't give a rat's ass and has no accountability. And then you have the other side that is like, let's just be honest, kind of partisan. And maybe they should be because of, the other party is an anti-democratic party. But then, pretending like, there's an inauthenticity, like, pretending like they're being fair. And so, I don't exactly know how to fix that. But I think that, like, in some ways, the mainstream guys made their own bed by not being just a little bit more transparent about where they're coming from. Because the big criticism we're having of Fox right now is that they weren't being transparent, right? I think that there was an element of that, not nearly to the same degree in kind of the pre-Trump era mainstream media that like got them to this point. Am I sounding like Molly Hemingway now?
No, I think, but that's not the main criticism of the Fox.
JBL says yes.
Well, okay, no, but that's not the main criticism of the Fox guys. I mean, it's not my main criticism. The main criticism is not the clubby chumminess. The main criticism is that they knew how bad it was. They knew that Donald Trump was the instigator, and then they lied about it for the next 10 months. They lied about it hours later. Right. And they spun and they deceived to distract people from the thing that they knew to be true. What the texts prove is that they knew the opposite was true of what they went on and told their viewers.
A little bit, but that's okay. That's neither here nor there. Yeah, you wanted to go, Sarah. Go.
I just wanted to make one last point on this, which is that I went and I follow a lot of the people on Twitter who are the media critic types, the ones who are always there to tell you how the mainstream media is cocking everything up and how they're lying to you and all this stuff. The media types, and I took a long spin through all my faves.
Red Steez? Did you go visit Red Steez?
I sure did. And you know what people were tweeting about? Either nothing, either it had been hours and hours and hours since they tweeted, and they weren't going to say anything, or I'm gesticulating wildly and like knocked over my water bottle. I get so wound up, I'm like sweating. Either they said that or they were tweeting about like totally different things like inflation. And look, it's not like everyone has to have exactly the same conversation, but the strategic silence that people do when there's a flare up around the awfulness of January 6th or something else with Trump where like there's just no getting around it. I haven't seen it. Have you? Have you seen anybody sort of just tacitly say, well, I think this is a weird thing for Fox News to be doing?
They're all saying it's good. That's the point. Yeah, they're all saying it's good. Thank God. The Lord. I mean, that's what we were making fun of at the top, right? It's galling. They're all saying it's good. And you can just imagine the just sort of, how hot and bothered and engorged they would be getting if this was Lester Holt, right? I mean, you can just imagine. And so that is where the imbalance comes in. I don't know what the solution to that is. I mean, these guys are fucking hacks.
Also, last night, I went and watched Laura and Hannity last night because they were going to address the texts. And it was wild. It was all like, well, this is just because people hate Trump. They hate Trump. They hate Trump. They don't want Trump to hold elected office ever again. Fact check true. He should not be able to hold elected office again because of these things. But then it was just like these screeds about Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and the Never Trumpers. Bill Kristol even got a shout out from Laura Ingraham. Like randomly she starts talking about how Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are going to go, that their only future is to become MSNBC contributors, just like Bill Kristol, which he's not, but whatever.
Well, the Jews are out to get him. I think we knew that I didn't think we knew we were going to end there.
I think it was more like this is all the Never Trumpers' faults. Is where we found ourselves.
I just watched one clip of it. I didn't punish myself like you, but I liked how Sean was whining. Poor Sean was whining about how he can't email anymore and he just can't text. I can't be complicit in any more coups because people are going to check in and get FOIA'd, and it's just so hard. And Laura's over there going like, Sean, bro. Like, let's not go there. Hannity just has a little bit a higher valence on his victim status.
Wait, on that point, so what he did is he went on and he was like, is there no privacy anymore? Are we just to expect that there's no privacy? I believe in privacy. And then like 30 seconds later, it didn't even take him like a beat where he was like, I want to see all the Cheney family texts. Turn them over to me. I want to know when they pardoned Scooter, when they were, getting Donald Trump to pardon Scooter Libby. I want to see their text messages. And I was like, bro, you have spent the last, I don't know, like year. I bet you dedicated 1,000 hours to Hunter Biden's laptop and to making that stuff available. But you're going to spend your whole show whining that somebody sees your text messages.
If only he had gotten Tucker's kid into Georgetown, maybe the Fox people would have let off him. Maybe he would have had a better right to privacy had he done that.
Before we move off this topic, because we're running very long here, very, very long, I just want to say something briefly about Fox. So there are people on the left, the same people for the most part, who believe that Trumpism is simply the logical conclusion of conservatism, that this is where it was always heading, who are saying like, well, this is what Fox always was. Not true. Fox was not always a good journalistic outfit, but it was not always propaganda. And it is not a coincidence that as the Republican Party became authoritarian, Fox News went from being an ideological troll job to a propaganda network, because these things go hand in hand. Everywhere you have ever seen authoritarianism spring up, there is some form of party-controlled or state-controlled media that happens around it, because authoritarians need propaganda outlets. That is part of the playbook. And this, again, I just don't think it's accident.
I have to reject this. I mean, I think that there was... I guess that they did a better job faking it in the past, I guess is what I would say. That there was a real attempt to try to fake it, for credibility's sake, and that during the Trump era, they lost caring about that. I think that was really the main difference.
That's an important difference.
Because, I mean, Glenn Beck,
that's an important difference,
all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I mean, okay, sure, I guess. In some ways, similar. In some ways, it could be. Yeah. Anyway, I think that there is some ways that they paved the way for getting here by being effective and
totally true.
Being
Don't disagree with that
inauthentic
at all.
and kind of pretend. Yeah.
News item from the Houston Chronicle today. Can I just read you guys 3 paragraphs because it's amazing? A Harris County grand jury on Tuesday indicted former Houston police captain Mark Aguirre on an assault charge.
The former Pistons small forward?
No, different Mark Aguirre. That's a sports ball thing, Sarah. He was accused of running a man off the road and pointing a gun to his head because he thought that he was committing voter fraud in the run-up to the 2020 election. Hold on, here we go. Prosecutors allege Aguirre slammed into the back of an air conditioning repairman's truck at about 5:30 a.m. on October 19th of last year. He pulled a gun, forced the repairman to the ground, and put a knee on his back. He ordered another person to search the truck. A police officer happened upon the scene shortly after. Aguirre, who was fired by the police department in 2003, would later tell investigators that he was conducting a, quote, citizen's investigation into an alleged ballot harvesting scheme he thought was orchestrated by local Democrats. He told police that they would find hundreds of thousands of ballots in the repairman's truck. They found only air conditioning parts and tools. Aguirre said that he had been following the repairman for 4 days. But here's where we get to the best part of all of this.
Is it, just really quick, is it possible that this person is so advanced in his voter fraud that he took the ballots and made them into air conditioning repair equipment, right? And so the hoses are actually made of defrauded ballots, fraudulent ballots.
Aguirre, a licensed private investigator at the time, was hired to investigate fraud claims and paid about $266,000 by the Liberty Center for God and Country, meaning that there were conservative groups out there dropping close to 300 G's on private investigators to follow citizens around. What the fuck is this? This is crazy town. And all of this, I stumbled on this because I was investigating an incident in the Villages, the place for sex-addicted retirees down in Florida, where they were very, very upset. The Stop the Steal movement, very strong in the Villages. And they uncovered some voter fraud in the Villages. And they, in fact, arrested 3 residents of the Villages for committing voter fraud. All 3 of them voter frauding, trying to vote for Donald Trump twice. Oops. Oopsie.
This is the time where we should shout out a Bulwark Plus fan and reporter at the Salt Lake Tribune, Brian Schott, who wrote a similar story recently. Well, there were no guns drawn in his story, but that was about the Utah Voter Verification Project. You see this? The UVVP. It's a very long-standing... Yeah, the UVPA is a very, it has deep roots in the community. Kind of goes back to the days of Brigham Young. And they have been knocking on doors, trying to match the voter rolls against the humans that are living in these homes to try to uncover voter fraud in the state of Utah, which Donald Trump won, by the way, as an effort, which you might not have remembered that, as an effort to demonstrate that if there was even fraud in Utah, on behalf of Joe Biden, that must help prove that there was also fraud in neighboring Arizona. There's a Colorado copycat effort of this, or maybe, I guess it might not be a copycat. I don't know what the chicken and the egg was on these groups. That there have been 3 percenters that are part of that effort. So, you've got, the guys, the OK sign, the white nationalist adjacent folks,
Hawaiian shirts.
Have been going door to door at people's houses. Yeah, which is not intimidating at all. Having these guys come to your door and ask you about your voting history. So, I guess the point there seems to be a trend.
Yeah, it's a trend. And there's lots of voter fraud out there, not enough to make a difference in the election. But it turns out that anecdotally, it's almost all Republicans. So it's all projection. As everything else in Trumpism, it's projection.
But did you see the AP had a massive story where they went through absolutely every instance of voter fraud in the swing states, came out yesterday, huge research project. And they found, I believe it was 476 instances of verified voter fraud. And it was a bipartisan affair. So a bunch of them were Republicans. So that is nowhere near. I mean, it had an infinitesimal, and they caught them. Like the system, they could figure out who they had reasons. They had the ability to figure out who they were. And so, and some of them were inadvertent, whatever. Some people are going to jail there's a lot of people trying to vote twice. But that's it. Under 500 cases in a election where, let's see, 71 million plus 78.
8174.
80.
150. 150 million.
I don't know what you add
Just
those
called
up
150.
to. Great. 150 million. That's great. So incidentally, actually, that's extraordinary.
So here's where
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Have I ever told you the story, just really quick on the aside? Have I ever told you the story about my friend's mother and the voting fraud?
You did, but you can tell it. We have Charlie's audience today, so they don't know.
And she was regaling her friends about the problem. There was a discussion among the friend group about the problems with voter fraud and their concerns about how the Democrats had been defrauding elections. That's why Republicans were losing. And that, they were all getting hot and bothered by that. There was someone else wasn't there. It was just sort of sitting quietly. And then, they moved on to other topics, kids' graduations, et cetera. And, 20 minutes later, they come back. They're talking about their kids. And one of the moms who was complaining about voter fraud said that her youngest son was off at college and received a mail-in ballot, which she filled out on his behalf in supporting Donald J. Trump, despite the fact that her son opposed Donald J. Trump, forged his signature, sent it in.
I'm sorry, what's the point of the story, Tim?
She told that story she told that story to kind of regale the same crowd that have been complaining about voting fraud. Everyone laughed, and there was like the normal in the crowd was like, well, didn't you just
so here in the same way, I mean, this is a perfect parallel. In the same way that having standards for the mainstream media, but no standards for the right, is an advantage for the right. Having a bunch of people who are so invested in this that they're willing to do voter fraud, who are also convinced that there is voter fraud, and then another section, the other 51% of the country just being like, I just want to live my life. That's helpful to the guys who are in on the voter fraud stuff. Like this is why going into 2022, the most energized subgroup of voters are the people who believe that Donald J. Trump was the rightfully and duly elected president in 2020. This is a problem. No?
Well, yeah, this is the Not My Party this week. It comes out tomorrow. Is sort of about the MAGAverse. And this is one of the unintended consequences. You'd say I think that there's some good arguments for deplatforming from the big platforms, but one of the unintended consequences of that is there is now just this growing and burgeoning, basically dark web of conversations where all this stuff takes place, and where there really is no accountability, where there's a lot of calls to violence, bids to combat, and as Rudy would argued on the 6th. And, to your point, the tenor of those conversations is so inflaming. And so not only is that going to help, the folks in 2020 who are willing to pander to these people's delusions, but also on the danger side. I mean, there's a direct line between that and, the guy, well, I guess the guy in Houston doing the citizen's arrest, there's a direct line between the billionaire donor who was funding that. But in a lot of these other cases, there's a direct line between like the information ecosystem these people are living in and, these sort of deranged actions that follow for that. Because if you have, particularly with people with tenuous mental health, if you keep being told that the country is being stolen from you, why wouldn't somebody act on that?
It's not just tenuous mental health. I mean, why did people storm the Capitol? Because they genuinely believed what these guys were saying about the election being stolen, and they viewed themselves as patriots, right? As doing a necessary job. And I think this is the thing that I find so vile about the posture of Fox News is that it is meant to be a bit in a lot of ways. They are winking at people. It's a joke. The producer's there, right? They know what they're doing, but they think, screw them if they can't take a joke. But there is a level of and there's a lot of people who are in on the joke. And it's just the Fox News cinematic universe trolling the libs, and it's fun and games. But there is another layer of people who will take you seriously when you say that the election was stolen, who will view it as their duty to go do something about it. And then there's an even smaller slice of people who do have tenuous mental health or who are looking to get into trouble and just need an excuse. And this is what gives it to them. And that's what fuels violence. It's the reason that a bunch of Republican politicians who've tried to stand up to Trump have had to walk off the field because they're afraid for their families, or a bunch of Republican politicians who know that what Trump did was wrong, but couldn't say it, wouldn't do it out loud because they were afraid for their families, because they know there's a section of these people who are taking it all too seriously.
All right, Tim, where did you want to go for part 3 here?
I have a topic. I want to close this out with Christmas and the supply chain problems and Christmas being canceled. But I want to do just a really quick brief. There's a little news item this morning. I think it's worth getting your guys' live reacts to. I don't know if you saw this, but Ron DeSantis is holding.
Oh, I heard about this. Go ahead.
It's called the Woke Act. Have you heard about this, Sarah?
No, I have not heard about this.
The Woke Act is being introduced today.
What does WOKE stand for? Is it an acronym?
I didn't look. There's some great signage though. They spent enough time to put the sign for the placard for the podium together. Good advance work. Maybe it was the No Woke Act. Actually, the listeners can fact check me. The premise of the Woke Act is that
SB 8.
It's modeled off of the great conservative legislation of our time, the abortion bounty bill in Texas, and now Florida is expanding on the Dan Patrick, Greg Abbott brilliant kind of legal construct by creating a system that allows parents and maybe just members of the community to sue schools and teachers and administrators if they teach critical race theory in their schools, again in violation of state law, the state law that's going to ban critical race theory in Florida. So huge win for the ambulance chasers and the trial lawyers, who are now the top class in the working man's GOP. Got to make sure those guys can make as many bucks as possible. Bad news for administrators, who are now potentially at threat of being sued if they exercise their free speech and discuss, I don't know, Toni Morrison's sexualized book or something.
Well, I'm sure there
like
won't
that.
be anybody like that Houston former cop in Florida who's out, creating frivolous lawsuits that have nothing to do with, even if you don't actually talk about Toni Morrison. So where are Barry
citizens
Weiss?
arrests? Why do just lawsuits?
Are Barry Weiss and Andrew Sullivan on the case here? Or are they still worried about how terrible critical race theory is, and how awful it is to work at the New York Times op-ed page?
I try to keep tabs on that crowd, I think I've seen Barry. I know for a fact Camille Foster, who's been on this podcast before, who is sort of in that crowd, has been very critical of the anti-critical race theory, the speech restricting laws. So there are at least a handful of them over there. We'll see.
Great.
We'll see. We'll monitor. Sarah, are you for the Woke Act? This seems like something that would be up your alley.
Yeah, right up my alley. What's interesting is I remember part of what was supposed to be, and I don't know why I do this, but I spend a lot of time thinking, like, remembering just 20 years ago when I became a conservative and what we were taught and the values that we had. And one of them were things like, it was the libs who were always like, there ought to be a law. And that the conservatives were like, no, there shouldn't be, because people can exercise their judgment. And conservatives have really gotten in the game of deciding that they should pass laws to police things that they find objectionable, just like culturally objectionable. And it couldn't be further from everything we learned about what it meant to be a conservative. Like, this is why when people say this is the natural extension of conservatism, I'm always like, that is not. It is like the total opposite of everything that drew me to this in the first place. It's like a funhouse mirror deal. It's not some logical extension.
I sat in a banquet room, and then we're going to move to our final topic. I sat in a banquet room in 2004. Everyone was wearing frumpy suits. The keynote speaker was my boss at the time, Bill Lee, who was running for governor of Delaware. It was my first job out of college. I was his driver. And I sat in this room of Republican Chamber of Commerce types. And the entire speech he gave, it was about tort reform. and frivolous lawsuits, and how we kind of take it to the left.
Love it.
And, how there's, just bollocksing up the court system, and, it's hurting the free enterprise. It's hurting people's ability to, speak and act, within the freedoms of this country. And now, like the party that, these nerds that were giving a standing ovation, not quite Trump level, but a raucous, luncheon style kind of golf clap level ovation to tort reform, are now completely on board with vigilante lawsuits against people who want to teach about slavery or, get abortions.
Tim, before you close us out with happy talk about how great everything is, I do want to say that for all of our lives, it basically didn't matter what state you lived in. Some states had higher taxes than other states. That was about the biggest difference, right? Otherwise, a state's a state. We are rapidly approaching a moment where, because Republicans have decided they want to pursue the authoritarian project even down to the state level, where your experience of day-to-day life may wind up being quite different, depending on whether or not you live in a red state or a blue state. And where if you hold certain beliefs and you live in Tennessee, you just got to get the fuck up and move to Massachusetts or something.
This is one where I do think, I'm not going to both sides everything about it, but this is where you get into a vortex of backlashes, right? Like New York and California set insane precedents on all kinds of things. And so then red states decide they too must set insane precedents in complete opposite directions. And I do think it pushes us further and further apart to the point where culturally, you're in completely different worlds. I mean, people say this all the time. Like they go down to Florida and they're just like, pandemic doesn't exist there. It's wild. But I'm not going to say that this is all red state problem.
Okay, well, we can fight that out. I want to get to Christmas. I was promised that Christmas was going to be canceled this year. The supply chain problems were
Joe
so
Biden's
great.
Supply chain problems.
Yeah, Joe Biden's supply chain problems were so great
with his communism.
We were not going to be able to order presents. Yeah, the communism had come to America. We were not going to be able to order presents. Little Johnny and little Sally were not going to get they were not going to get the Barbie playhouse that they were going to share this year because the parts that were coming from China were going to be stuck out at sea. And I've noticed something. The conversation about Christmas being canceled has sort of gone away and been replaced with conversation about the great MAGA Christmas tree that was burned to the ground in New York. But Christmas kind of seems fine to me. I don't know. I mean, I guess I want to acknowledge that I think there remain very serious economic issues for President Biden, particularly looking ahead to the midterms. I was at the grocery store the other day. Things did not seem that normal to me at the grocery store as far as prices were concerned. So I think that there are very real inflationary issues that hopefully get resolved next year, and this should be top of mind. But at the same time, it also, I think, merits mentioning when there is a lot of anger driven up about the coming apocalypse and, all these big problems that are coming because of socialism, and when that turns out to be just not the case at all. And when it comes to Christmas, I did all of my shopping on Monday from my bed. And it seems to me like the capitalist system here in America is working pretty damn great. Etsy's firing. Tyler doesn't listen to this podcast, so I can say that he will be receiving some jewelry from some Etsy artisans, and Amazon. The great big corporations seem to be working. The small corporations seem to be working, and I didn't have to do a damn thing. I just, my little pointer finger's a little bit tired.
Sarah, this is your chance to take a victory lap for capitalism. Don't let it go by.
Okay. It's great. Stipulated. The thing I actually really want to take just a quick run at is I have seen some of folks on the left doing this thing. Actually, Charlie had a great item about Mark Elias in his newsletter recently about how, and I've seen this happening, where it's like anytime.
I'm just really excited about how you're going to get from Mark Elias back to Christmas being canceled.
Oh, I'm not even trying to get back to Christmas. This was a topic I wanted to hit. We skipped it, and now I'm going to hit it. Which is, so this, where every time Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney, does something great and people praise them online, Mark Elias feels the need to come in and say that they did not vote for the voting rights bill. And I see this all across the left about Liz Cheney is not a hero. And, why are we all praising Liz Cheney? I mean, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but I'm pretty sure she's single-handedly saving democracy right now. Like, there has not been a solid attempt to really get Trump. Like, we've gone through 2 impeachments and they've been lame and ineffective. And Liz Cheney is just saying, screw it all. And she's being diligent. She's being an adult. She's being clear. She is creating new news around January 6th when people were done with it. And I am here for what Liz Cheney is doing. And I think that people who get caught up in the idea that they do not vote for whatever preferred progressive policy, and I'm for the voting rights bill. I am for the new Manchin compromise. But the fact that they're not, for whatever technical reason they have, does not mean they're not doing the heavy lifting for democracy right now.
And new from the Bulwark, coming out just in time for this Christmas, is we have the Liz Cheney figurines that we're going to be offering that have a little Bulwark logo on the back of her pantsuit. They'll be going for $59.99. You get a free Bulwark Plus subscription when you buy one, and if you order today, thanks to the supply chain issues getting resolved, you'll be able to send them anywhere in the contiguous 48. I don't think it'll make it to Alaska in time.
Ooh, you're the worst. But here's how I'm going to get back to Christmas, which is, first of all, if you, like me, love people like Liz Cheney who are putting country over party, you should tell all your friends to subscribe to the Bulwark. You should give them a gift of the Bulwark for Christmas. You can give them a gift subscription. And I think that is also a good way to help democracy and capitalism. So I've tied it all together.
I agree with you. Liz Cheney's been great. I do want to know how your Christmas shopping has been going, though. I wanted to hear whether I thought maybe this is just anecdote. Maybe I was an outlier, and things are problematic on the home front, and that Karen's not going to get, whatever sort of fingerless gloves or wood chopping materials you were planning on getting her this year.
Your gay man conception of
LL Bean is
lesbians
bringing it home at the Longwell household. Don't worry.
It's true. We are single-handedly keeping LL Bean in business over here.
Are things going to be able to get from the Northeast all the way down to Bethesda?
I hope there's not supply chain issues because I am starting
You've not ordered Christmas
I'm starting to note that it's getting perilously close to Christmas and that I may have a thing or two I still need to procure for all of the people in my life.
Stocks were shelved at the Home Depot. I was there yesterday. I think that you'll be just fine if you want to get her a shovel or...
Oh, no.
I don't know. What else?
You know what else? I took a pass on saying anything to you when you suggested you got your husband jewelry.
I didn't even say
anything. I didn't even say anything.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying the Etsy folks have been pretty responsive if you want to get on after this.
I mean, is there something gayer than saying you ordered your husband jewelry on Etsy?
See, I'm sure we could come up with something gayer, but it's towards the top of the list.
Well, it's not just a Subaru joke.
Listen, while we're doing this, I would like to Tim, you asked on Twitter last night what you could get for your godson because you proposed a double Papa Shot setup and your mother nixed it. And his mother nixed it.
Not his mother nixed it.
So
his mother nixed it. Yeah, I wanted to send. I was like, right as I was about to click send on Amazon, I was like, I don't know where I could fit a double Papa Shot in my house, and I wouldn't really love it if it just showed up on my front stoop.
So just send without asking now. Send a drum set, and that will teach her to never say no to your first idea in the future. But I then slacked you the ultimate answer to this, which is an arcade 1-up NBA Jam 4-player console. And your response was?
I had already purchased it. We were that in line that when Papa Shot went down, I went straight for the Arcade 1 NBA Jam. So my godson in Baton Rouge will be receiving that instead. And he'll just get to learn about all the 90s greats like Stacey Augman and Roni Cycli and Tim Hardaway's Killer Crossover
Cedric
and Sean
Mullins. Kemp. He's heating up.
Oh, man.
Sarah, this is, what's funny is that of the three of us, only one of us owns an arcade cabinet style video game.
It's me.
And it's you.
It's true.
So don't go turning your nose up at this ridiculous conversation about home arcade games.
Well, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but I was very awesome in my 20s, and I do have one of those Pac-Man tables that you had at the pizzeria that two people can sit next to. or to sit on either side of, and my boys are just figuring it out.
Do you set the dip switches to the easiest level so that the ghosts are like super easy to confuse and your boys can feel like they're champion players?
I know. I have no idea I didn't know you could do that.
Yes. Yes, they're called dip switches. If you open up the console, you will find that there are ways to set it to easier or harder.
You should come over, actually, if you can just take the console off, because it's really loud, and I would like somebody to come turn the volume down.
We can arrange that. Okay. We can arrange that. All right, very long show again, guys. Congratulations,
totally
you got your
length.
wish.
It's totally normal length of show. We do it every week.
We've got the Bulwark Festivus tomorrow. You should promote that, JVL.
Yes. You guys, if you're a Bulwark Plus member, you should come pop on the live stream tomorrow. Our end of the year Festivus Bulwark extravaganza on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Maybe the best thing we do in all of our various forms of content all year long. Only for Bulwark Plus members.
There will be a feats of strength.
There may be. There will definitely,
Mona and Charlie.
There will definitely be airing of grievances. That's the one thing I can promise. Guys, if you are a regular listener of Charlie Sykes, thank you for hanging out with us, and hope you go and join Bulwark Plus and come hang out with us at the next level next week.
I'll be back tomorrow.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Peace.